Welcome to the first part of this course. In part 1 we're gonna be starting the hair, which includes generating our textures, setting up our Maya project, and getting our hair inside of marmoset. There's also a link down in the description to my Discord, and I encourage everybody to join it, so I can help you out if you have any questions, or you can share your work there. And we can see what everybody's making. So yeah, good luck and let's get started. So here's the hair that we're gonna be creating. I picked this one because it's pretty easy to start with this part. And then as we do the second part, it's gonna be a little bit more difficult. So over here I just have a bunch of images of hairstyles that are similar, so I can have more reference to look at. And what's important when you're collecting reference is that you have some views where you can see the whole hairstyle from different angles. And then you have some photos where you can see the details a bit better. Like if we zoom on here you can clearly see all the details. And it doesn't need to be the exact hairstyle, but just something similar. So you can see what we can add. It's also important to see for some photos where you can see some clear flow of the hair. Another really great thing to do is to collect some reference of 3D hairstyles that other people made. So just go to ArtStation, type in 3D hair for games and look for ones that you like. So here's some good ones that I found that are similar. And this guy, he does a lot of great hair. He also has some tutorials. This is a studio and they make amazing hair. And this one's really different from our hairstyle, but I really like the render, so I added it. And this is just to kinda go back and forward and look at other people their work and make sure the quality is matching. So let's talk a bit about our hairstyle, how we're gonna break this down. You don't need to do a whole breakdown for every hair that you do. But if it's one of your first hairs, it can definitely help just to plan everything out. And I did it just to clear things up, like I can explain the steps that we're gonna be taking. So first, if we look at our hair, you can see that it's made out of two parts. I'm gonna call this one the main part, this one's the tail part. So in the beginning, we're just gonna be focusing on the main part. We're gonna get that done for a bit, and then we're gonna be working on the tail. So here I have a really chaotic image of all the layers that I'm gonna be doing. So we're gonna start with a base layer. If we zoom in, we can say let's split the main part into 3 parts. And we have one part here. Then we can do another part like right here. It's just a little block, little block, little block. As you can see here the parts. We're gonna be covering this with thick haircuts. The idea of this layer is to cover as much as the scalp as possible and to determine the flow of the hair. So once we have the base layer done, we're gonna add a breakup layer. And this is just gonna, as it says, break the base layer up. It's gonna have some cards that have more transparency, and we're gonna be covering the base layer cards with these cards. This is just gonna detail it. And one thing you wanna make sure is that with the breakup and the base layer, you don't end the base layer all the way here, as these are gonna be really thick. We're gonna need some thinner cards here to have like a nice soft transition. So after we're done with the breakup, I'm gonna add a layer that's called the cover layer. This is just gonna be covering some of the sharp, the harsh transition that we have from skin to haircuts. We're just gonna be placing them here. It's gonna be covering the transition for a bit. It's gonna add some depth. And we can break up the flow of the hair with this a bit. If we look at here, like the base flow, it's gonna be going like this. And then we can add some curvature in these just to break the flow up a bit. It's gonna make the hair look more interesting. Then we can add a second cover. I'm just gonna do this for... If we look here, we have some hairs that are going really against the flow. I'm just gonna be putting them on their own layer. And the reason why I'm adding so many layers is just to organize the hair. It sounds a bit complicated, but you will see splitting everything up in layers is gonna be really easy, and it's gonna make everything a lot more organized and clear. So after we're done with the covers, we're gonna be adding some baby hairs. This is where we're gonna be seeing some details in the transitions from cover to breakup. And the idea of this is just some soft cards just to blend it in. So these are gonna be really soft, subtle cards with a lot of transparency. After we've added those, I'm gonna add some detail cards. This is just gonna give some detail to the hair. If we zoom in, you can see these light up hairs. That's the idea of the detail layer. I'm gonna be adding some detail. Once we have that in, we're gonna go to the noise layer. This is just gonna be some noisy hairs that are like really messy and all. It's gonna add some more detail and noise. We're gonna be generating these with XGen. And for the texture, we just have a single hair. And then finally, for the last layer, we're gonna add a flyaway layer. Now we're gonna be basically doing the same as the noise layer, but with a little bit more control. We're gonna be doing this with hand. It's just to break up any flatness of cards. So let's talk about software that I'm gonna be using. I'm gonna be modeling the hair inside Maya. And to do this, I'm gonna use this plugin by George. It's an amazing plugin, and I use it for all the hair that I make. For the textures, we're gonna be generating it with Fibershop. You can also generate textures with XGen or whatever way you like. But I really like Fibershop as it's really easy and fast to generate some textures. And for the rendering, we're gonna be doing it inside Unreal Engine 5. So let's get started. Inside Maya, the first thing that I wanna do is optimize our workspace a bit for placing hair cards. So first let's open up the plugin. You can just drag it here and dock it. Gonna get the outliner. Let's get rid of the timeline, as we don't need it. Get rid of this thing. Now let's press the Trigon hair plugin. Let's open up the curve control window. Let's dock it. And then we're gonna dock the plugin right here. Just drag it down. And one thing, if you close this and it won't open again, you have to restart Maya. Or you can edit. And you can go down, 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 down. And right here, if plugin won't run, change this name. And then change this name if plugin doesn't start. Just make sure to change one thing. Then we can close it. And then we can click it again and it will open again. So let's just dock it here. Then I want to get the channel box. Let's just drag it out. Let's put it right here. And let's close this one up. Now we have one viewport here with workspace, and we have all plugin stuff on the left. You can also just put it on your second monitor, but as I'm recording and I need everything on the screen, I'm gonna do it like this. And I'll probably prefer to have like some reference and maybe Unreal Engine open on the other screen. So I already prepared my scene, so I'm just gonna open it. And has my model that I'm gonna be creating hair for. So the first thing I want to do is grab the model. Let's group this all together. Let's call this head. And I want to put this on a layer. Create layer from selected. And make sure it's on R for reference. And now we cannot select it, only if we do it in the outliner. Another thing, make sure that you have the anti-aliasing on. It's gonna make your viewport look a little bit better. Now it's gonna go to render, viewport. Let's go to anti-aliasing and just put it a little bit higher. Now that we're here, we want to change the transparency algorithm to depth peeling and put the quality up all the way. You can also disable clamp textures, but mine is fine like this. So now let's make some textures. First I'm gonna go to viewport, I'm just gonna crank this one up. Then I wanna go to environment, actually document, put on 2 times 1. Let's change this to horizontal. I'm gonna go to background image. This is an image I made earlier. And it just has all the sketches of the haircuts that I want. These are really fast and I did them in like 5 minutes. Just by looking at the hair like this card. And then just do a quick painting in Photoshop as a guide. This way I can plan out how I want to put the cards before I actually have to do anything. So we can change this a bit. Let's put the block offset at 0.1. This is just like edge padding for your hair card. So let's do a duplicate. Let's call this card base. I'm gonna put it right over here. We can also do an overlay. This way you can see the card underneath that you sketched. So let's do the width. So something like that. The length. And to get this effect, you want to change the length to randomness. Let's turn overlay off so we can see what we're doing. Root slope. Just gonna do the same but at the beginning. Root randomness. Let's go to document. Material, no, environment. Material. And let's change the preset to stripe black. Blonde. Let's keep that brown, I think that's the nicest. Let's change this a little bit. I'm just choosing something that I like to look at. This is not the final. Change the specular a bit. Whatever makes it easiest for you to visualize your hair card. So I think for me that's nice. So let's zoom in on our reference. I want to create something like this. First thing that I'm gonna do is add some clump. This is just hairs sticking together. I just want to be messing around with the sliders. So I think like that. Let's add some flyaway. And seed will just generate it a little bit different with the same settings. Just to get a different look. You can go to strength curve. You can decrease the tip a bit. So something like that. Can translate a little bit. We can add another clump. Give this one a bit more density. Some width, and let's put the strength really low. And you can toggle them off and on by doing this. I wanna add some curvature. So add modifier, and let's go to curl. Let's change the scale a bit. Randomness. And again, it doesn't need to look exactly like a sketch, but it's just a guide for yourself. You don't want to be spending too much time on this, as we're gonna go back and forward between the textures and modeling. And it's really easy with this program. I'm gonna do one more scatter. And now we can just generate a second card over it. Change the length. Just trying to create this effect right here. Randomness. Now let's add a curl. This is just gonna curl the new generator. We can shift it. Let's make it a little bit less dense. Actually, let's keep pretty dense here. Now finally let's do one more clump. Put this one underneath the curl. And again, you want to make sure that it's not see-through at all. You just want to have a little bit. And actually I think this is still a little bit too much. Now we can just go to main scatter. Let's go to reduction. Now density. Let's just put this up. Now we don't have any gaps here. So we can go back to shading, see how that looks. We can move it a bit. Let's put it here. Make this one a little bit smaller. This just to determine how the cards lay. So I think that looks nice for now. I'm gonna keep it like this.
The texture with these. Now we move these around. We will make sure we don't cross like cubes. This way is just going to show the texture. It's always going to be laid out the same. So, put this here. Make sure that we waste the least amount of space possible.
Actually, we can click lock document size and this will do the same now.
I like to lay it out first with the little cubes.
But you can also just hit lock document size and that will do it. So let me just put it here. For this one, gonna put it here. Gonna be generating something of this one later. So now that we're done with the design, we go to bake and colors and you hit bake. But I already did a bake, so it's gonna be rebake. But there should be a big bake here. We're just gonna bake it out. Then go to export, choose a folder. We can disable UV ready cards. Put on JPEG and just export the alpha and the ID. So back in Maya, let's start adding some things to layers. Let's call this head underscore layer. Now let's make sure it's a reference. And this way we can't select it, only in the outline. And let's make a new card. Let's go to... Actually, let's open up the plugin again. Control window. Let's hit prepare. This is gonna create a group. Now in this group we're gonna go in. Now let's get a pure ref. And let's follow the layers that we laid out already. So let's group this. Let's call this main. And the plugin, when you hit prepare, is just gonna create a group where you're gonna need to put all your hair in. And it's gonna create a bunch of colored materials. So if you're doing this in another software, just create a bunch of colored materials. And later we're gonna link a text just to this. So now here in main, let's match this. We have base, breakup, cover, cover 2. Baby has duplicate, detail, noise, and fly. Now let's duplicate this one and call it tail. And we're not gonna touch this for now. Now in main, our breakup has 2 parts. Our base and breakup, I mean. So let's just group this. Call this one base again. Breakup. Make duplicates. Start at the base. Gonna move it up. I'm just making sure it's in the same order as this list here. In the base, let's call this one green. I'm just matching the color here. Let's call this green the group. Make some duplicates. Red and blue. Now let's actually just delete the breakup and duplicate the base. Now here let's call this breakup and move it here. Now we have a nice organized outline. Now let's go back to our card that we made. Gonna hit the path curve. And here we can move it. When you move it, and whatever, you want to do it at the curve, not at the actual card. Let's rotate this up. Let's open up the UV editor window. And as you can see, we don't have anything yet, because we need to link a texture first. Let's select geocard. And there's a Lambert material. All we're gonna do is hit the curve. We're gonna hit one of these colors, and it's gonna assign that color. Let's hit red. Now it's red. Now geocard. We're gonna link our textures that we made in Photoshop here. So let's start with the alpha. Just link the alpha one. And if you hit 6, it's gonna display the textures. One thing we need to do is go to effects and invert it. I'm not sure why, but if you make the materials through the plugin, you just need to invert it. But you only need to do this once. And let's go back to the material. Let's go to ambient color. Let's go with the ID in the ambient. Now if we hit any color, it already has the textures linked. So now we can easily switch between colors while we work. So I linked a different texture, but you should have the JPEG in here. If you use the TGA, it's not gonna work with the plugin. So we go to UV editor window. And now you can see that we have a texture here. But we have one problem. The texture here, it's not stretched. And if we go to the UV editor, we go to geocard, you can see that it stretches the texture. This is how it should be. So now the problem that we have is, if we go back to the UV editor, now if we lay down our UVs, we cannot really check how it's laying, because the images don't match, but we can fix this. So to fix this, let's go to Photoshop. Let's do a Ctrl N. Just do a size, it doesn't matter. Now what we want to do is we want to go to Window, Actions. And you want to click this one. It's going to create a new action. And let's call this Alpha Adjust. And hit record. Now everything that we do in Photoshop is gonna record. And you're gonna be able to play everything that you do back. Like, I'll show you. Now we go to File, Open. We go to Textures. And we go to Fiber Alpha or Fiber ID. I'm gonna use the Fiber ID. And this is the one that you're gonna be seeing in the UV editor in the plugin. Actually, let's go with the alpha one. So I'm just gonna open that. I'm gonna zoom out a little bit. And all that I have to do now is go to image, image size. Let's disable this. Put it to 496 as well. And as you can see, this stretches the whole image out. So we hit OK. Now we have a stretched image. Now all the way through this file, save as. And let's do it in the textures as well. We call this one Fiber Alpha Stretched. And just hit save. And OK. Now we can stop the recording. So I put it in the default actions. Let's just move it out to Trigon Polypaint for now. Let's go here and create a new set. Let's call this Hair Fix. Let's just put it in here. And the reason why you have to go through this yourself and I don't supply the action is because it's gonna be dependent on your pet. So you don't want to change your hair pet or your extension at all or name, because then this will break. So now let's go to Maya. And I just duplicated one of these. And now we go to edit. And here in assign is white. We can give this a name for a material. So let's go with UV stretched. UV stretched. Now let's copy this. Ctrl C. Now let's do lighting shading. Assign new material. Assign favorite material. Let's do a Lambert. And actually we need to go to the geo card and do it here. So Ctrl Z to undo. Lambert. And now we paste the name here. You want to make sure that's exactly the same. Now in the ambient, in the transparency, go to file. And now we're gonna link the texture that our action made. So just open this. Now you can see that we have it here. And if we go to the UV editor now, you can see that we have a stretched texture here. Now the way we're gonna work with this is, now if we go back to Fiber Shop, let's go to design, and let's say we changed something, so let's put this one here. Now we go to bake, rebake. It's gonna rebake it, then go to export. Make sure that everything's the same, hit export. Now after we've done that, we go back to Photoshop. Now all we have to do is hit the alpha adjust and play it. Now you can see a new stretch texture. If we go back to Maya, hit 5, 6 to refresh the textures. Go to UV editor.
Select graphic and UV editor. And I'm not sure why it's not vectoring. Go to the normal UV editor. You can see that we have the new stretch texture here. And now we have the new UV editor as well. If it doesn't show up, just kinda click off your card and hit the graph. It's gonna pop up eventually.
So let's try that again. So once again, design, move this, rebake, export, go back to Photoshop, hit the play. It's gonna update here. Maya 5 and 6, and it's gonna update the texture. Hit off the curve and hit the curve again. Now you can see a texture. And as soon as you've laid down the UV, we're gonna click a color and we'll get the color. And as you can see, now everything's alright. So the way we're gonna be working in this tutorial, we're gonna use these to preview our hair. And as soon as we're actually gonna be laying down some UVs, you wanna click this one that we made. Now we can work with the UVs. And then once we're done working with the UVs, we click one of these. It's a little bit annoying, this workaround. But I talked to the guy that made the plugin, and he's gonna work on an update. So you have a normal stretched texture here. It's gonna be coming in a future update. So for now we're gonna need to work with this little workaround. But it's not too bad. As you see, we're not gonna be touching the UVs too much. So we're gonna be duplicating the cards all the time. It's just in the beginning, you're gonna work with UVs. So now let's get to actually making the hair. So for this, actually first off go to options, use 40 layers and use numbers only. Now we have some layers. I'm gonna explain what these do later on. Now we're gonna get this card. Actually, let me get my pure ref here. And you wanna have your pure ref on another screen. But for the tutorial, I'm just gonna keep it here. And we're gonna be doing this part of the base first. So I'm gonna go to my outliner. I'm gonna put it in the red group. So let's move it. Gonna orient it. Let's go to the UV editor. Again, if we're working with UVs, make sure to use this. Now let's get our UVs. Hit the E to rotate and hold down shift so it will snap. W, you can see all the shortcuts here. In this little box, this is gonna be the root of your card. So here. So make sure it's rotated right. And if you hit the R key twice, it's just gonna toggle between the horizontal scaling and the vertical scaling. It's a little bit weird to work with these tools at first, the UV editor, as it's so different. But as you get used to it, it's really easy. So just match these UVs up. And now that they're aligned, you can exit out of the UV editor and just go back to our color again. And let's change the width a bit. Right click, control vertex. Now we get these little points on a curve. Let's go to compound. And this is actually gonna control the shape of our hair card. We can rebuild to add more or less. So I want to start out with only a few. So let's place our hair card. Don't need this window, so we have a little bit more space. And at the base layer, the thing that you're mostly trying to achieve is the flow of the hair. So right now we're covering the head and we're deciding on the flow that we're gonna be doing. I think that's pretty good for the first card. So one thing, let's actually, right here, everything it's gonna flow towards this point. So that's where the hair is being pulled to by the tail. So let's create a sphere. Let's move it up. Let's make a save as well. You want to be making sure that you save often. With this little ball, we're gonna represent the point here. So just so we have a guide to where all the hair cards need to flow to. So let's see. Just trying to match the scale up a bit. Seeing, I think right here is a good place. So now let's call this one hair guide tail. Now in our layers, let's create a new layer. Let's give it a bit more space. Create layer from selected. Let's call this one hair guide tail and score layer. Again, make sure it's on reference so we cannot select it. This is just gonna make it easier to select the curves, because if we put this more out of selection, you can see that you can accidentally select this. So let's put that one back. Now just make sure that all the hair cards that we're gonna be placing are ending right here. Let's add some profile. And this is just gonna add some thickness to the card. Wanna keep it subtle though. Let's do a rebuild so we get a little bit more control. You want to try to avoid things like this, where it's intersecting with the scalp. You want to try to get as close as you can to it without intersections. And I'm switching the gizmo mode by holding down the W and left mouse clicking. I'm just going through world and component, whichever one makes it easier to move. We can also go to twist. This is just gonna rotate the end. An invert twist is just gonna rotate the beginning. And you can have a little bit of intersection, that's fine. There's also some clipping. If you get closer, maybe there's no intersection at all. I think that's good for our first card. Actually, I wanna have a little bit more curvature. Just as you can see, there's a lot of curvature here. So let's go with something like this. Now we're gonna make a second card. All we need to do is go here and hit the duplicate. It's gonna make a duplicate of the card. Now we can move this up, down, do whatever. But make sure that you do it while you have the curve selected. So we're gonna be placing this here. Now as you can see, it's a little bit hard to see which card is which one. That's why we're working with colors. So we can choose a green. Now we can clearly see the difference between the two cards. This is just gonna help so the cards are not intersecting too much. So I'm gonna lay this one out. Again, let's rebuild so it's easier. Actually, we have two of them. Let's delete one. And now we have one. So control, let's rebuild.
Doing my work, let's let the work, let's try to rebuild it. Let's select. Let's see if we can select it here. New is missing. Just need to find things like this. I just think things like this. Oh, yeah, so what's the reason that the rest of it? Last one, yeah. No, different color. Let's. I'm scrolling down. I'm just sure where's the mark. Select reload.
It seems to break, but you have to go to object mode and then you can just edit it again. This might be a bug inside my 2022. Because I worked with the plugin before and I don't remember it happening. So let's place this card. I think it's a little bit too close to the transition, so I'm gonna move this one up. I think something like that is better. As you can see here, there's a lot of coverage, so I wanna just cover this with the base layer. Actually, let's pull everything down a bit. Especially this one. Go to control vertex. Again, you're gonna go back and forward between all the cards all the time. Let's move this one up a little bit more. And I want to keep the blue card underneath it. To get a little bit more detail. Breaks object mode, just select it again. And I'm constantly going between 4, 5 and 6 just to make it easier to select sometimes and see. So let's make sure that we have some coverage. Make sure that's close to the scalp. And you can have some intersections, especially in the base layer, because it's gonna be hidden by other cards. But you want to try to have the least amount if possible. So now let's go twist, so we only rotate the end. So like this is fine. Just fix the intersection here. This is gonna be most of the work of doing hair. It's just gonna be going back and forward and fixing intersections. If you have a little bit of intersection, you can also go to hit the curve. So what you can do if you have a little intersection is right click and toggle geometry edit. Now we can just edit this by hand to fix the intersections. Then once you're done, you can go toggle geometry edit off. You want to try to edit the topology as the least amount as possible. You want to be doing most of the work with the curves. Also, let's move this bit back a little further. Just trying to match the topology a little bit better. These segments. Like the better they align, the better it will be for making LODs and whatever. And for having less intersections. You can change how many you have with the length division. But I think this is fine for the base. So that's looking better. Let's do a little bit of inverted twist. Let's move this out a little bit. I think we have too much profile, as I want to have it closer to the scalp. You want to spend a lot of time on your base layer, so this is gonna be the base for the whole hairstyle. So don't be afraid to spend a lot of time on it. So I want to have this edge a little bit closer. To the scalp. So I think it's actually easiest if we just go to this one. Now arrow up and Ctrl H to hide. It's this one that we hit. So now let's do a toggle geometry edit. Go to component. We're just gonna move it a bit. Like I said, we're gonna try to get it as close to the scalp as we can. Let's push this one out a bit. So again, I'm just pushing the verts closer to the scalp, so we have a little bit less volume, because we're gonna need to cover this with a lot of other layers. So if we alt click the first layer, you can unhide everything again. So let's disable geometry edit. If the pivot is messed up like this, you can just hit reset pivot and we'll fix it. Let's move that one out a little bit. Toggle the geometry edit again. We're gonna move this out a little bit. So to get rid of the clipping there. Toggle the edit again. So let's grab the red one. Let's do another duplicate. We're just gonna be doing this the whole time, grabbing cards and duplicating them and placing them. So right now I wanna define the border of this group. So let's put a card for this one. Then later we can place one more card here to fill it up or move this one around. Again, you don't want to have it too close to here because we need space for a soft transition. So I'm gonna move it up. As you can see, the text just got a little bit low. So to fix that, go to viewport and clamp textures and reload all textures. And if your card is too long, you can also hit the reduce card. That's right here. Make sure you're on curve and just hit reduce. Let's rebuild it. So I think like that is okay. Let's move it closer. Add some extra points. I want to make sure that this one's on top of the blue one as well. Now let's move the blue one around a little bit. So it's gonna cover this as well. As you can see, we're just going back and forward between all the cards that we're laying down. Just looking for the right position. Let's move this one up a bit. It's too close to the ear. Something more like that. So I think we have a little bit too much of a curve here, so let's straighten this out. This is just the flow that I'm talking about. Like, should be a little bit more straight here. I think like that looks good for now. Let's take another blue card. Let's do a reset pivot. Duplicate it. And here we're gonna do like the parting of the hair. So around here should be pretty good. Let's reduce this one a bit. And as you can see, we're not working with UVs at all. We're just doing it one time for one card. Then we just keep duplicating the card. We don't need to worry about it. And I know it looks really bad and ugly right now, but the hair's gonna look horrible most of the time that you're working on it. And in the end, when you have all the layers, it's all gonna come together. The biggest part is that you just believe that it's gonna look good in the end, and you keep pushing the hair. Again, rebuild the curve when you need to have a little bit more control over what you're doing. I think this one's a little bit too close to the ear. Let's push that back a bit. And these intersections, they don't really matter too much, because we're gonna be covering this. But you wanna try to get most of them out, but you can keep a little bit. Let's also break this up a little bit, because right now it's really perfect. And I think that's gonna do it for this part, the red group. So let's do Ctrl S to save. Let's clean up a little bit. I noticed that we have a card too many, so if we zoom out, you can see there's a card here. So just go through your stack. And here we have the card, and just delete it. And everything's gonna be on this layer. These are just layers you can store things in to easily hide and select them and whatever. One thing that I want to do is go to options, sync curve color to layer color. This is just gonna give them all the same color in this layer. And if we put some cards in this one, you'll see that they have a different color. So now that we have one layer done, let's talk a bit about getting your model out of Maya and inside Marmoset and an Unreal Engine 5. In this tutorial I'm gonna be focusing on Unreal Engine 5, but I'll quickly show you how to get it in Marmoset for the people that do it over there. So all that we have to do is you want to make sure that you work with the hair group. Now you just hit export. That's gonna export the hair. Now we go to Marmoset, and in the folder you will have Z-Temp Trigon hair. You will find your hair, so just drag it in, and there you have your hair. Then we can go to material, we can quickly go to transparency, put it on Ditto. Now we're gonna pick a texture. That's the alpha. Make sure channel you put it on anything but the alpha. So let's say red. Let's go to sky. Let's change it to color. Like a neutral. Let's do a little bit less bright. Now in the occlusion. In the occlusion map, just put the ID. Same for the cavity, the ID. I like to keep the specular pretty high. And the occlusion, just put it to something that you like. Now in the color here we can change the color for the hair. Later on we're gonna have textures for the hair, but just for when you're editing, that's a good way to do it. Just so you have some detail from the ID map and some color from the slider, and we can easily change this. Now for the roughness, just pick something that you like. Let's put the specular. And same story here, just put on something that you like. We're gonna get the maps later. And finally go to render and put some ambient occlusion. Also put in specular, just put something that you like. That's how you set up the render in marmoset. Now if we go to Maya, and let's say we change our hair, so move this one up, export, let's undo that. Now if we go to marmoset, you will see that it updated automatically. So Maya, export, marmoset, and you have your hair. Now back inside Maya, let's start working on the different base parts. So we're gonna be doing the green part now. But first let's actually get this to the other side as well. So to do this, I'm just gonna select them all, Ctrl G to group. And let's call this right side. Now go inside. Now we go to mirroring and hit X. Let's do this for all the cards. Now you can see that we have all the cards back here. Gonna need to select them all. Let's go to orientation and orient them. That doesn't work. Let's do them one by one. Orientation and orient them a little bit. It doesn't need to be perfect, as later on we're gonna delete this. We're just gonna mirror the final pieces here. But first we're gonna work on the other layers that are gonna be above it. So once we are sure that we're not gonna make any changes to this, we can do it like a nice copy and paste. So let's select them all, Ctrl G. Let's call this left side. Just move it up. As you can see, we can do an export and we can check it out in marmoset. Also let's put the head inside marmoset. Let's create a new material. This one button, this one. Let's call this head. As you can see, it's rotated wrong. We can fix this just by going to head. Let's switch the rotation. I think it's the Y. 90. Nope. The Z. 90. Nope. It's the X. 90. Minus 90. Now let's do the same for the hair. Minus 90. As you can see, now we have a head and hair. Let's actually go to render. And I don't like the AO too much. Let's go to strength. Let's just put it down a bit. Now let's go to head. Let's put a normal map. So here we have a normal map. Let's actually go to main camera and change the focal view. Let's put to something like 21. So roughness. And we can put a color. Let's do like kind of resembling a skin color. Let's call this one head shaded. Now let's make another material. And put this to none. Albedo none. Diffusion none. Actually unlit, I think. None. And none. And none. And now in the emissive, I think none as well, yeah. Now in the glow, we can set a color for our mesh. So let's do something like this for now. Let's call this unlit. Now we can switch between the two. I like to work the most with the unlit one. Let's change the roughness a bit. Specular. I think that's nice to preview our model. So let's save that. So I'm recording this part after I already finished all the hair. Because I noticed I kinda messed up with the hairline in this course. Like I was doing it in a really bad way. And I think a better way is to just go inside ZBrush. We can just kinda paint our hairline, I mean. So we don't have to plan that with the cards, and I think it's just gonna help a little bit. So to do that, just take your mesh and fill it. And then we take a white color, just take RGB. Make sure to not have Z-Add enabled. And just subdivide until you have a nice resolution. Then I would just come in here, and of course you're gonna use some reference images and all that. You just go ahead and paint your hairline. So I'm just gonna do a really quick one, as I don't need it anymore. You wanna be sure that you spend quite some time on this, which I didn't do in the course. And that gave me quite a lot of problems later on, trying to get the hairline okay. You could also come in here and like define the areas that I was talking about. So you could say, here we have our top part. Then here we have our side parts. You could put that in for where the ponytail's gonna be. And then here we have our back side. And if you're working on hair, you can also do like modular hairstyles. And I'm gonna talk about that more later on in the course. And then something like this could also be very useful, but I'll talk about it later. So the way we can get this poly paint inside Maya right now, we just go to texture, we do create, new from poly paint, and then here we have a texture. Do want to make sure that first I flip in vertical. For some reason that's how ZBrush works. Now you can see we have a texture. So now clone texture. Then you go to texture, and you click it here, and you go export. Just gonna put it here, hand line, and save it. Then inside Maya, select a face and create a new material, and then here we want to make sure that we link that texture. Now we can see the hairline. As you can see, the hairline is quite far back as well on this model, because I messed up in the reference. It was looking up, which was messing me up a bit. And this way you're just gonna have like an easier time laying everything down, because later in this course I'm gonna be pushing the base cards and all that a bit further and everything a bit further to try to get the hairline a bit better. But would have really helped if I just did this, and it takes a few minutes, and then started laying everything out. So yeah, you should do this. So now let's start doing the top part. Let's get rid of this thing. Let's select a curve, duplicate, and just move it up. I'm just gonna give this a completely different color. Let's go with green. Let's rotate it. And I think, yeah, this is the green part. So we're gonna take our card and put it in the green group. So at this point I want to make sure that I have some nice flow. Like I don't just want to have it go straight like this. It's gonna look fake and boring. So I want to have like a S shape. Again, get it as close as you can to the scalp. And setting these points, it's like ZBrush. You don't add more until you need to have more. Push them as far as you can with as little as you can, like subdivisions. Because if we have a lot here, it's gonna be really difficult to make changes. So like that's okay for now. Let's duplicate. And it's not taking the card. Let me just Control Z. Let me check it out. Path. I don't know why, but messed up. So let's just delete this one. Go to this one. Do duplicate. This time it's working fine. We have everything. I think earlier I just moved the curve to the group instead of the whole card. So let's do that again, green. So we can push these ones a little bit further. But don't push them too far. Let's go here. While you're doing this, you want to make sure that you're looking at reference. So for this one, I'm following an image on my second screen that's going like this. So you can see a nice S curve here. So maybe a little bit less. So I think this is nice. Now let's grab it. Gonna do a duplicate. Click that twice. Let's actually do a mirror. So we have one on the other side as well. And as you can see, the hair doesn't go like this. Exactly mirrored. So we want to change the flow a bit. It's gonna be more like this. Like I said earlier, it's really important that you get the flow of the hair right with the base layer. Because with the breakup layer, we're gonna be following the flow of the base layer. So if the flow is going wrong here, it's gonna go wrong on all the layers. And putting the base layer in, it's gonna take a lot of time. It's gonna be a long process, but just take your time and don't rush it. What we can also do is we can select two curves. And then at add, we put this to 1. We do add. It's gonna create a new haircut. It's gonna interpolate the two shapes between this. It's gonna give us a curve with an average between the two. So now we can select this one. Make sure it's oriented right. Reset the pivot. Just move it up a little bit. Also want to have this one be a little bit more thick. Let's change the color to yellow. Actually, let's keep using the red and the blues. As you can see, now we have a different color shape, different color curve here. To fix that, go to options, sync curve color. Just do it again. And now it will have the same. And the more times you do this, the faster you're gonna get with laying down the curves and changing all the settings and everything. It's gonna take a little bit of getting used to, as it's a really different workflow from any other thing that you will do in 3D. So I wanna have a little bit more flow. Something like that. Now to fill a card here, I'm just gonna select these two. These two. And again, I'm gonna hit fill. As you can see, here we have a card. Let's reset the pivot. Let's move it up a bit. I want to make sure that's inside the right group. So this one should be in the green group. Make sure that you move everything, not just the curve. Let's give the red color. And for this one, I just want to break the flow up a little bit. So it's going to be a little bit more interesting to look at.
Actually, I did a little bit too much. Just tone it down.
Want to move this one a little bit so we have a little bit more flow. For this one we can just mirror. Let's orient. And it's intersecting a lot right now, so we gotta fix it. Let's just select this one and push it down a bit. So like I said earlier, we're just gonna go from card to card and we're gonna keep going back and forward. So let's fix the flow. And again, if at this point you're like, I do not really like my texture for the base layer, you can also come back and you can edit some settings and re-export again. But for now I'm happy with how it looks. I think it looks fine. Actually, let's move this one up a little bit. What we can also do is we can go to a card, we can taper. That's just gonna make the ends a little bit less thick. Now you can adjust it. So let's save, now that we're done with the green part for now. I'm still gonna need to come back later and fix the intersections and clippings. We have some empty space that we need to fill up. But I just want to move around as much as I can from parts. Like, don't work too long on this part, because you want to go back and forward between all the parts in one layer. Because you want to see how everything's coming together. So we can do an export. We can check it out. So click this. Let's do callback faces off. But for now, let's do this part. So let's get to creating the last group of the base layer, the blue one here. So again, just gonna select the curve. Let's reset the pivot. And duplicate. So let's make it end about here, so we can have some transitions here. We don't need too much flow for this one, it's just gonna go straight up, pretty much. I'm just using the blue and red colors and not any of the others. So when we put in the other layers, I can easily check what's the base layer, the breakup layer, the cover layer, just by looking at the colors. You can also use the soft selection to manipulate multiple points a bit easier. So this can be really handy once you have a little bit more points and you want to go back and edit the flow. So a good way to work is now to duplicate this card. And you don't want to place it here and adjust it. The better way to work is to make like an outline. This is gonna be the most outer card, and then you have a card here. And then we can do the add to fill it up. It's just gonna be a little bit faster to place the cards this way. One thing that's really important, you do not want to delete the history in your scene. As soon as you delete the history in your scene, all the cards are gonna break. And you're not gonna be able to edit them anymore with the curves. So that's something to keep in mind. So I think we can use a bit more flow here. And I'm just looking at the topology here right now to see the flow. Let's grab the ends and soft select, and then we can rotate it. A little bit too much. I think like that's good. We can mirror the card. Now we can select all these three. We go to add and we do a fill. It's gonna fill them up. Just gonna move this one a little bit. And again, I'm not too worried about all the intersections right now. Just worried about laying all the cards down. Then I'm gonna go in and tweak them a bit. Actually, let's delete this one. We're gonna mirror it. And I'm just moving this one down, because I do not want to have it up, as the hairline would be a bit weird if it's gonna go like this. Should be like more even. But again, this is not where we're gonna put the hairline. We're always gonna extend it by a bit from the base cards. And the fill feature, it's so powerful. It's one of the reasons why I love this plugin. And the mirroring is great. So instead of reducing the points, now I'm just using the soft select. We can also do that. Just do whatever you think works the fastest and the best for you at the moment. So I think this intersection is really bad here. So let's try to get rid of that. make this one a little bit thicker at the base. Just to cover the gaps, yeah. And I do not like how this just a little bit on top of everything. I think we can push it down a bit and it's gonna blend in better. I think that's better. Give a little bit more flow to this one. Maybe blend this one underneath. So let's do a twist. I think that's okay. So let's actually see how it looks. And again, I'm just worried about getting the flow right. So it should be flowing up here. Here as well with a curve. But we're gonna break this flow up with some cards covering it. So let's work a bit more on the top cards. As you can see, we have a lot of empty space. And that's it for the first part. In part 2 we're gonna be cleaning up our base layer. And I do wanna remind you that you can join the Discord channel to ask any questions or share your art. You can also buy the project files over at ArtStation. The link will be in the description. And by doing that you can also support me and the cause. So yeah, see you in part 2.